Know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView, Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Good evening. The AUKUS deal has been struck between America, Australia and the UK. We're going to give them new nuclear submarines to replace the rubbishy old diesel French ones. Does this mean with Brexit that the UK is once again a world player? We're going to look at HS2, which is now becoming the most enormous white elephant. I'll ask the question, why can't we just stop it? It's far too painful. Ian Duncan-Smith comes to join me to talk about China. Where does Rishi Sunak really stand? Because I'm terribly confused. And joining me on Talking Pints, the one-time wonder kid of the darts world who stormed to victory from nowhere, Keith Deller, former world champion, joins us. But before all of that, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you and good evening to you. The top story tonight. A woman has been sentenced to 8.5 years in prison for perverting the course of justice after falsely accusing a number of men of rape. 22-year-old Eleanor Williams had also created a Facebook post alleging she'd been the victim of an Asian grooming gang. Preston Crown Court heard how 3 of the men she'd falsely accused of rape had attempted to take their own lives. And at the time of her accusations, there were mass protests in her hometown in Cumbria, with some businesses forced to close. Williams will serve half the sentence in prison. In other news today, the Chancellor is looking at increasing the lifetime pension allowance in an attempt to reverse the current trend of going for early retirement. It's understood Jeremy Hunt's considering allowing individuals to put more money into their pension pot before they're taxed. The current lifetime allowance stands at just over £1 million, with savers incurring tax after the personal threshold has been exceeded. Well, the measures are expected to be unveiled in tomorrow's budget as the Chancellor looks to increase Britain's workforce to help stimulate the economy. Full coverage on GB News tomorrow. Now, the US military has said tonight a Russian fighter jet has collided with a US military drone over the Black Sea, forcing the US to bring down its unmanned aircraft. It says the US Reaper drone was on a routine surveillance mission in international airspace when two Russian jets tried to intercept it. According to the US military, the incident resulted in the complete loss of the US drone, with the White House saying the incident was unsafe, unprofessional and reckless. Now, controversial social media personality Andrew Tate has had his bail request denied by a court in Romania. Tate and his brother Tristan are being held over alleged sex trafficking in the country, which is under criminal investigation. It now means he'll remain in custody until at least March the 29th. The pair were taken into custody in December but haven't yet been formally charged. And lastly, the Queen Consort met a young ballet dancer today who's set to star in a new Disney documentary. Camilla met Anthony Madu when she visited Elmhurst Ballet School in Birmingham. The 13-year-old Nigerian received a scholarship from the school after a video of him pirouetting in the rain went viral in 2020. Now Disney is making a documentary about his life. The Queen Consort wished the young star the best of luck. On TV, DAB, digital radio, tune in and online. This is GB News, the People's Channel. Time for Farage.
Good evening. Well, we can trace it all back to 1956. Now, I'm not joking. It was the Suez Crisis of 1956 when we attempted to take back the Suez Canal. The Parachute Regiment, the Royal Marines were in, but the Americans didn't support us on that one. The pound went into freefall. Pressure came on the Prime Minister Anthony Eden, who was forced to resign. Britain was humiliated on the world stage in a way that had never happened in modern times. And that led to a change of thinking in the Foreign Office and the upper echelons of British society. And simply it was this: the age of empire was over. Macmillan came in as Prime Minister, gave his winds of change speech. And Macmillan, the Foreign Office, the aristocracy decided that our future was now to be with Europe. And indeed, in 1961, we lodged the first application to join the common market. It all goes back to Suez. And ever since 1956, we have withdrawn progressively east of Suez to the level at which the UK simply wasn't playing a role. Indeed, we even turned our backs horrendously on Australia, New Zealand, and many, many of our friends in this pursuit for being part of a new European political empire. But with Brexit, I think all of that has changed. And I may have railed on this programme about the British government since 2019 not taking the full benefits of Brexit, but on the world stage, I tell you something, we're standing taller than we were. You see, Australia, who became very much more dependent upon China for trade as a direct result of us leaving them behind and going into what became the European Union. Australia were also the first country to realise the serious potential threat that China posed. And that threat isn't just economic. That threat clearly, increasingly, is military as well, as China starts to build bases on sea atolls and directly threatens Taiwan. Now, to protect Australia, they've been using diesel, French-made diesel submarines, and this has suited French contractors beautifully. The problem is they are as good as useless in the modern world because they have to surface at least once every 48 hours or nearer once every 24 hours for oxygen and for air, whereas a nuclear-powered submarine can stay submerged for up to 4 months at a time, undetected by China or any other potential enemy. So the AUKUS deal has been struck, and yesterday in San Diego, President Biden, Prime Minister Albanese and Rishi Sunak were there together, basically signing on the dotted line. What does it mean? It means that we're going to provide Australia with new nuclear-powered submarines. Rolls-Royce, yes, a British company, will build those small nuclear reactors that go into them. As for construction, some of it will be done in Australia, some of it will be done in America, some of it done, particularly components, in the United Kingdom. And in the meantime, America, more than us because they're stronger, will start to provide nuclear submarine support for Australia. It's an attempt to rebalance power in the Far East. And we are now playing a very leading role in that. As members of the European Union, it would never have happened. Tonight, I want to debate, do you agree with me that the United Kingdom is now beginning to become a world player once again? Let me know your thoughts. Farage at gbnews.uk. Well, I'm going to go now to Australia. I know it's an ungodly hour of the morning, and I'm very grateful to Alexandra Marshall, the online editor of The Spectator Australia, for getting up in the middle of the night and speaking to me. How were the images of Prime Minister Albanese there in San Diego yesterday, the AUKUS deal being signed? It seemed to me when I was recently in Australia that this was a policy that had support across the political spectrum.
Well, good evening. It's lovely to be with you here today, Nigel. And I can safely say that Australians are breathing a sigh of relief because it's the first time that our Prime Minister has actually made use of one of his numerous overseas trips. So we were very grateful to see him using his carbon credits to our advantage and signing this very important deal with both the UK and America. And really, it feels like coming home. Australians have this deep connection between the UK and the US that cannot be broken. It's basically a family bond. And so this AUKUS deal makes perfect sense. And quite frankly, it's not even a product of the current political leaders of the day. It's not a reflection of their negotiating skills. This had to happen because the rise of China, an authoritarian communist force, had to be dealt with. And the only way to do that is to form a strong alliance to protect the Pacific.
Well, I agree with you, Alexandra, absolutely on that. And I'm very pleased that Brexit Britain is now able to reconnect with our friends, indeed our kith and kin, frankly, in Australia. And boy, I can't wait for the cricket between us this summer, a separate issue. I agree. But this deal has not been met with universal praise. You see, the Chinese say that this involves the use of weapons-grade uranium and threatens treaties that exist on nuclear weapons. What would you say to the Chinese?
It's a little bit hypocritical of China after building up the largest navy in the world, mind you, not the most powerful navy, and in possession of plenty of nuclear submarines of their own and nuclear power plants, to come at us and say, how dare Australia seek to defend the Pacific and itself. So China loves to screech and scream about these things, but the point is, they started the game, and so they can't expect other nations to sit around and do nothing while they stretch their limbs with their Pacific friends. It hasn't been all, love and roses and hugs. Ask Taiwan and Japan how they feel about China's behaviour. And so Australia had no choice, and it doesn't threaten the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty because we're not building or housing weapons-grade uranium in Australia. That's happening in the UK and US. It's not happening here. We don't even have a nuclear power plant capable of producing power.
Now, I know. I mean, the extent to which Australia has turned its back on the production of uranium and using nuclear power has amazed me on my visits, but there we are. But you see, Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of the Russian Federation, and it's worrying, isn't it, how close it seems that China and Russia are now becoming. He says this action could lead to years of confrontation.
Well, the only parties that are seeking confrontation are China and Russia. Australia is not seeking to invade anybody. We're quite peaceful down on our little island. We'd rather trade with China, which we have proved over the decades, making them our largest trading partner. And indeed, there are figures in Australian politics who would rather we didn't create a military arrangement, but they think that trade will protect them from conflict. But the lesson of the last two world wars is that your biggest trading partners, that it does not protect you from conflict with them. And so we have to remember that with China, that if push comes to shove, our trade relation is not going to be the buffer that we hope it is as far as our actual protection of our nation. So, you know what, they can hate it, but there's not really any geopolitical choice here on the market.
Alexandra Marshall, thank you for joining me here on GB News in the middle of the night in Australia. Thank you very much indeed. Well, let's get some American reaction to this. There was President Biden, centre stage in San Diego yesterday. Greg Svensson is chair of Republicans Oversee and founding partner of Brig McAdam. Greg, after the unilateral withdrawal from Afghanistan, without even telling us it was going to happen, many of us thought, well, this is it. You know, despite the America is back stuff that we heard in the 2020 election campaign, that effectively Biden had taken America back into its shell. Is the AUKUS deal a sign that actually America still wants to be a player on the world stage?
Well, I hope so. And I think surely America does. And most of us understand that the UK and the special relationship is vital to economic and security issues. So, you know, I'm glad that the president finally woke up to that. He's obviously been pro-EU, very much against Brexit, pro-Ireland. You know, he hasn't really shown friendship to the United Kingdom until now. So I thought it was a wise pivot on the heels of Afghanistan, on the heels of, you know, cutting the defense budget in the U.S. by 3%, you know, on the heels of the disaster with the relationship with the Saudis, which, you know, allowed Xi to step in and negotiate the deal between the Saudis.
Yeah, I mean, this is...
So he needed to do something positive.
Yes, on the one... I agree with you. On the one hand, we've got AUKUS and a very positive image of an American president flanked by British and Australian prime ministers. But on the other, President Xi has been more active in terms of international diplomacy than I think most of our viewers and listeners even know. I mean, extraordinary. You know, one of Trump's great boasts was that he brokered the Abraham Accords between Israel and some Arab nations, and I was absolutely in favour of all of that. And yet, remarkably, and almost uncommented on by the media, is President Xi physically last week brokering a deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran.
Yes.
So isn't the truth of this, and I'm all for the AUKUS deal, and I'm all for us playing a role on the world stage, but isn't the truth of this that actually, as we talk about our support for Ukraine, as we talk about how united we are behind Zelensky, that actually China, on the other side of us, is potentially building a massive coalition?
They've played it well, and I think Biden set it up with the disaster in Afghanistan, and then he also set it up by damaging the relationship with the Saudis until he needed the Saudis to pump more oil. Then he went to Riyadh and begged them to
was humiliated.
Pump more. Humiliating for sure. And by the way, before the Ukraine invasion, he also sent his people to Moscow. Jake Sullivan went to Moscow and begged Putin to pump more oil. So, you know, first he just tries his best to destroy the energy sector in the U.S. and then complains later that, you know, we're not pumping enough oil in the world, so I'll go to Venezuela and Russia and Iran ultimately, and the Saudis. And so, you know, you can't have it both ways. And I think, you know, Trump did a great job managing the Saudi relationship. It's been an important, not as important as the UK-US relationship, but surely important for generations now.
But now damaged.
And Biden managed to mess that up.
Well, I mean, Saudi was Trump's first overseas visit. It was a very symbolic, big moment.
For sure.
Greg Svensson, thank you for joining me. And I think, folks at home and listening in your car, we should be pleased that once again we are becoming a player on the world stage. Not a force. We're not big enough militarily to be a serious force, but at least a player on the world stage. But listen to what I say. China are putting together a potentially massive alliance and coalition of countries that is against our interests, America's interests, and Australia's interests. So we can celebrate a little bit with AUKUS, but I suggest not too much. In a moment, we're going to talk about where HS2 has got to. Is it perhaps now the biggest white elephant in British history? All of that in a couple of minutes.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So, with Brexit, are we becoming a world player? Some of your thoughts coming in. James says, absolutely, Nigel, Brexit is the best thing our country ever voted for. Another viewer says, yes, let's hope deals continue to be created. Another says, no, there was nothing stopping us making ships before. Yeah, listen. We would not have been able to do a deal on nuclear submarines with Australia as EU members, as the French already had contracts for the useless diesel submarines. Oh, and by the way, perhaps the best thing about the AUKUS deal is that President Macron's genuinely upset. That must mean it is a good thing. Ryan says, yes, the AUKUS deal shows what an independent UK can do, and I agree with that. And Roger says, no, we already were, until the Tories, UKIP and Johnson, got their hands on it and made an utter mess of things. Roger, I tell you what, matey, you can like it or dislike it. You can think we're making the right foreign policy decisions or the wrong one. What is for certain is that an independent United Kingdom stands taller in the world. Look at Ukraine, where we've very much taken the lead. As EU members, we would have been pretty much forced to act in unison with everybody else. Now, HS2, I've talked about it for years and years and years. I've campaigned against it for over a decade. I never thought from the very beginning we were going to get a bang for our buck. I never believed from the start that the British government was capable of doing it. And when I saw that the private sector weren't prepared to put a penny piece into it, I thought, goodness me, the taxpayer is in for a tough time here. The first estimate I read of the cost of a London to Manchester HS2 line was 36 billion. The latest estimate I've seen is in excess of 100 billion. No one doubts it could finish up as much as 150 billion. But now the news is that the delay to HS2 means for the next few years, it won't even run from Euston. It'll run from Old Oak Common. Try getting there, unless you live in North and West London. And it won't be going to Manchester, and it won't terminate in Euston until 2041. I mean, it's almost 20 years away. Now, the Labour Party have hit back at this, and they've said these delays will mean there's going to be even more expense. But do we need a radical policy rethink on all of this? Well, joining me is Emma Revel, Head of Communications and Public Affairs at the Centre for Policy Studies. Emma, as a group that studies policy, you seem a very appropriate think tank to go to. I mean, where are we with this?
As you say, the delays are phenomenal. They are not entirely unpredictable, as are the spiralling costs. As you say, the initial government estimate was something around 30 billion. We're now looking at over 108, and it's not going to go to Manchester until I'm in my 60s. I really would like to get a train to Manchester sometime soon at speed on this line, but it's not going to be possible.
Well, there are many of us actually engaging with this debate who'll be very pleased to even be alive in 2041. I mean, we are now in 2023. We're being told it'll be 18 years until this is completed. Is there any rethink, and why? And you know, and your group, you've got some pretty influential people within the Conservative Party that listen closely to what you have to say and have done for years. Why are they so wedded to HS2?
I think because the commitment is there, and it was initially a project initiated under the last Labour government, so it has Labour and Conservative Party support, and given the scale that has been spent on it already, even before, a shovel hit the ground, we'd spent, I think, 8 billion on things like planning permission and, impact assessments and things like that. Given the scale of the cost, politicians, I think, are probably understandably a bit reticent to go, no, we'll scrap it. Because the costs at this stage will be actually delivering the trains, which is the bit we need. What we've spent the money on already is assessments and planning and delay and reschedule and having to go, oh, actually, maybe we'll get rid of that line or that leg. What we still don't have is the actual tracks and trains that are going to be HS2. That's what we need to spend
and assuming that Labour win in 18 months, that may be wrong, but assuming Labour win in 18 months, it would appear from their statement today they're saying, go faster, go harder. So there's no prospect of policy change with Labour, is there? By the looks of it.
I don't think on HS2. And the problem, HS2 is a symptom of a wider problem in British political system, is that we are terrible at planning and terrible at managing projects. The government has nearly 250 what it classes as major projects. Only 24 of those are green coded, so on track to be delivered on time and on budget. There are 27, so even more, that are red-coded, which means absolutely no prospect of being delivered on time, on budget, and that the project itself appears almost entirely unfeasible as planned.
We've got a budget coming up tomorrow, and we're looking at potentially massive increases in alcohol duty, as much as 50p on a bottle of wine will be going on this year. Big raises in tobacco, taxes, goodness knows, but it looks like corporation tax going up by almost 30%.
Yep.
I mean, we could, if we scrap this project, it seems to me, be in a markedly better financial position.
There is a lot of money that remains to be spent to get HS2 delivered, and it will be decades, or at least years, if not decades, behind schedule. So,
but billions and billions of pounds of spending every single year for at least the next 18 years.
Yes.
Is it time to scrap HS2?
I don't think politicians will. I really don't think so, because they are so committed on both sides to the concept, and this country does need extra rail capacity. You can argue about whether this is in the right place, necessarily. It needs more capacity in the north, and it's the northern legs of HS2 that have already been scrapped or more significantly delayed.
Well, I would spend the money building more roads, because clearly a country with an increase... Emma, thank you. A country with an increased population of 8 billion since 2001, just look at the traffic jams, just look how difficult it is to move around. We could build the roads we need and do it within the next 2 to 3 years. If we had to spend money, I think I'd rather spend money on that. And as for capacity, well, you know what? We're going to need to build longer platforms. We're going to need to build bigger trains. There's no question about that. But when it comes to speed... Do you know what? You can go from Euston to the central business district of Manchester, Piccadilly Station, in 2 hours and 7 minutes. Is it really worth all this upset and massive expense just to get to Manchester 20 minutes more quickly? And would that drive business to Manchester? Or would it be rather like France, where the TGV, which made Marseille-Paris go from 6 hours to 3 hours. Now, that was a real saving. And all it did, it meant more firms relocated to Paris. None of this, in my opinion, will benefit the North or level up in any way at all. There we are. I've had my say. It's a complete waste of time. I've thought so for years. In a minute, Ian Duncan-Smith on China. He's going to tell me where Prime Minister Sunak stands on the threat or otherwise from China, because I cannot understand what the PM's saying.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Well, we've been busy talking about the AUKUS deal and the fact that Britain is once again a player, if not a force, on the world stage when it comes to post-Brexit Britain. But yesterday, the Integrated Review Refresh, goodness knows where they get names like that from, talked about Britain in a broader context. Defence, Russia, China, and joining me, Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, Member of Parliament for Chingford and Woodford Green, and somebody who's been speaking a lot about China over the last few years. Ian, can I begin on defence? We've now had 13 years of a Conservative government. We are shoveling vast amounts of equipment to help Zelensky in his battle. We're down to a stockpile of 6,000 artillery shells, which is a pretty serious situation. And this is interesting politically. You know, John Healey, who was the Shadow Defence Secretary, quite a capable man, I think, in many ways. You know, he said yesterday that the Conservative government have failed to secure our national defence. And when I listened to comments from your own Defence Secretary, who I thought was remarkably frank the other week about our defence capabilities, our inability I mean, let's supposing the Falklands War happened again, we couldn't possibly do it on our own. You know, has your government, has your party let the country down on this?
Well, I think, to be fair, we have done pretty well on some of the equipment and badly on others. And I think on funding, there is no question. We met the NATO requirement, but NATO requirement was simply not enough. 2%, which most didn't. And look at Germany, they hardly had any aircraft that get off the runways when Ukraine was invaded by Russia. So people have just assumed there could never be another war in Europe. And then lo and behold, Ukraine gets invaded by Russia, and everybody goes, told you so. So 2% was not enough. It will not be enough. The government's commitment to get to 2.5% is a start. But the way I see it right now is they have to be aiming eventually to get to 3%.
You know, everyone talks, Ian, about, you know, technology and new weapons, as they always do in every war and every time and every decade. And yet, truth of it is, as Ukraine proves, and indeed as the Gulf War proved with us, at the end of the day, without boots on the ground, there isn't much you can do. And the current projection is for the British Army to shrink to 73,000 people. And these massive shrinkages of manpower in the RAF, the Royal Navy, the Army, they've all happened under 13 years of Tory rule.
They have, and I think the trouble always with these things, that I was in government, I was also in the army too, by the way, served in Northern Ireland as well as Rhodesia. You need an army, otherwise you can't deploy. You can't deploy at home, and you certainly can't deploy abroad. And when I was in, the army was 150,000 strong. I always thought around 100,000 would be about right. Once you start dipping below that, it's very difficult then to do the multiple operations that are necessary. So part of the target of getting the finance up is also to get recruitment back up. Now, sometimes when the economy is growing well, it's difficult to get recruitment, but we have to aim to get more boots, as you say, on the ground, but on the ground here in the UK to fulfil the numbers that we're after. I think that's what the Defence Secretary was on about, quite rightly. The second thing is we do need to have the machines, the vehicles and the technology to support them.
I get that.
Otherwise they get a seriously bloody nose when they go into action, and we've given away a lot of that. That's fine, because I back Ukraine 100%. Got to resupply it, though. That means a commitment from the government for extra money.
China. Boris Johnson, self-declared Sinophile, much of his own family. Sinophiles. Rishi Sunak, I'm desperately confused. What's the position? He runs to be leader. He says that China could pose an existential threat. He then becomes Prime Minister and calls it a strategic threat. Yesterday, he says it's an epoch-defining challenge. Where the hell are we on China?
Well, we're moving.
What on earth does that mean?
Well, as you know, you grab what you've got and then you take it somewhere else. So, in my view, Rishi Sunak started by saying they were an existential threat. They moved to a challenge, but the truth is they are a threat. They're a multidimensional threat, whether it's commerce, whether it's IPs, whether it's actually trade, whether it's war, defence, military invasion. They've already invaded the South China Seas. They're carrying out terrible human rights abuses, genocide amongst the Uyghur, Christians getting smashed, the Tibetans are in forced labour camps. You don't need much more evidence to know this country is now a threat and growing to be a greater threat.
And yet we've made ourselves dependent upon them.
Well, this is the whole problem. And it happened, I'm afraid, very much under the watch. Started under Tony Blair, continued by, I'm afraid, the government that I was a part of.
George Osborne thought this was our future, Ian.
I know, and I'm afraid, you know, I was against it at the time. The golden decade has turned out to be nothing but a lot of fool's gold. And the truth is, too many businesses rush to China to get stuff made cheaply. They abandon the idea you need to make some things at home, and with the new manufacturing techniques, you can do a lot of this stuff back here. It doesn't require huge labour. So what we've got to do is start finding our allies to move that sort of production to, and also to bring some of it home.
And is Sunak the man to do that?
Well, he has come a long way now, because this latest, I say this genuinely because I was very critical yesterday, but the one thing I will say is they are now across, if you read all the language of this, it's quite clear they are across the idea that China is genuinely a threat. They don't want to say it publicly, but it's clear from the document that they recognise the threat, it's a growing threat, and it's multidimensional. What I want them to do is to eventually say, yes, China is a threat. It's a dangerous threat. It's a threat to their own people. It's a threat to us and the way we live our lives. And right now, all the idea that they're going to help us with Russia is for the birds. They vote against us all the time in the UN.
In fact,
they're talking about technology going to Russia right now as well. These are big moments.
There's a powerful alliance on the other side building up.
Completely. And they've got their own banking system they're setting up.
And they brokered a deal just recently between Saudi Arabia, Iran. Ian Duncan Smith, I know you're fighting the good fight on this. I think the Prime Minister needs pushing a little bit harder, would be my view. Now, a quick what the Farage from America. Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, is banning schools' instruction or discussion of sex and gender for children aged 8 or under. He doesn't think it's right. And yet, when it comes to hormone therapy, when it comes to sex change operations, well, President Biden has absolutely waded into this debate, and he says restricting transgender treatment for children, i.e. under 18s, and classroom discussion is cruel and close to sinful. And he's threatening to pass federal transgender legislation above states' rights. Well, one good thing about American politics, at least it's absolutely clear between Democrats and Republicans where they stand on issues like this. It's not quite so clear in Westminster, Ian, is it?
Oh, I think it's pretty clear now. I think Rishi Sunak's move to block the Scottish Government's bill absolutely caused furore, but it turns out to be absolutely right. So he is very clear where he stands. He doesn't want underage kids literally having propaganda thrust down their throats about what they do. They need time to understand who they are, what they are about, before they start making big decisions. Medical treatment has been abused in some cases, as we know, and that he, again, is very clear on. And Miriam Cates has been running another campaign, an MP colleague of mine, a really brilliant woman. She has been putting the spotlight on the fact that some of the schools, many of the schools now, because of a very lax idea from the education department, are actually now literally pushing some of this idea, or these ideas about what they are, what they should be in early ages. Some of the most ghastly, graphic sex education going on. That's got to stop. So all of this is part of a fight back.
I think it was good news, and Sunak was right, indeed, to take the action he did. And I think the pendulum swung back in Scotland in the most incredible way. All these crazy leftist activists, there's a silent majority out there. We just need to speak more loudly and more often. In a moment, he was a sensation 40 years ago. We'd never heard of him. His name was Keith Deller. He came and won the World Darts Championship, beating the crafty Cockney. Overnight, he was a superstar. He joins me in a moment on Talking Pints.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It was 40 years ago. Darts was mega on the television. Millions and millions of people watching it. And there were these huge stars. There was Jockey Wilson. There was the ice-cool John Lowe. There was the crafty Cockney and larger-than-life character Eric Bristow. And there was no question that one of them was going to win the World Darts Championship in 1983. No question, no debate at all. And suddenly this fresh-faced kid, he didn't even smoke, let alone drink very much. And he comes out of nowhere. No one's ever heard of him. They've never heard of him. And he won the World Championship. Yes, his name was Keith Deller, and he joins me now on Talking Bites. Keith, thank you very much. Good to see you. Now, that goes down as, you know, it is in the top 10 biggest sporting upsets in this country across every form of sport. And it's a magic moment. I'm going to come to it in a bit. Now, Ipswich boy, Suffolk boy, born and bred, still living there. You know, Ipswich, you're an Ipswich town.
Big Ipswich fan, yeah.
Still are. Yeah, we've had Terry Butcher on the show, and we've been up there. What was it about darts? Why darts, Keith?
My mum and dad had a dartboard in the kitchen. And I think when Sid famously said, you know, frying pan in one hand and darts in the other, and it actually was like that. So dartboard on the wall, and the Mrs. Sparks next door used to bang every time. Does he not? Can he come off that board? He keeps playing too much. And started playing darts, Nigel. And at 13 and 15, I played in my first dart league for a pub called the Kingfisher at Ipswich, and won the men's singles, which didn't go down well. Some young kid, who's he? And from there, I then went on to, it was a fives board. It used to be a Kent board, 5 20s and 10. Then I went on the 1 to 20 board and played in the Super League and won the Super League singles, and then county the next year. So I kept progressing every year.
Was it a natural talent?
I think so, but I just practiced all the time. As soon as I come home from school, I would do my homework because I wasn't allowed to play if not. And I could play for 4 hours. I just couldn't stop playing. I mean, I think I played 7 hours every day leading up to the World Championships. It was just, to me, you practice hard, you get the rewards.
Was it an obsession?
Maybe, but then I kept getting better and better, and I thought, oh, this is getting a bit easier, this game. And that's how it went, really. So
Now, I know you went off to America, didn't you? You were sort of in your early 20s, you went off to America, and darts was growing in America at that time.
Yeah, I went to, in 1981, a lad called Tony Sonte played for England. He said, do you want to go to America? And you've got to use this spring-loaded dart. And the idea was there's a spring and a screw in the barrel. If it hits a wire, it will come back out and go back in, which it just went one place. It was on the floor. And I went to Lake Tahoe, lost in the final, won the Austin, Texas singles, and then won the Cleveland Extravaganza on TV. Came back, went back and said, go and take the big boys on. And I won the Los Angeles Open. I beat Bobby George, I think Bob Anderson and John Lowe on the way, and that got me a playoff in London for the World Championships. And I always remember it was at Kensington Rooms in London, and the first player was from Spain. Well, you never saw a board there, so that was a good draw. That was 9-0. And then I had an American player called Len Hurd, and then the Scottish number 2, and that was, I think, 9-0 to get through. And that meant I was now going to play in the World Championships.
And that was the big year. So the big year when you stunned everybody. It was 1983, and you're 23 years old, as I say, very fresh-faced. I didn't know who you were, and I used to watch darts, and suddenly you appear, and you have to qualify, obviously, as you said, and on your way through, you beat all the top seeds on the way through.
Well, it was strange because I couldn't wait to play. When I saw the cameras there, I thought, God, I'm on TV today. It was just like that. To me, I wasn't scared, and I think if I had been, I'd have most probably lost first round. But I just couldn't wait to play, and I had Nicky Vrashkel, the first player. The year before that, I was doing some work in a pub. That's a bit of money, really. And Nicky Vrashkel and Terry O'Day, they all come in to practice for the 1982 World Championships. And they couldn't knock me off the board. And I thought, well, I've got Nicky now. And then I played a local lad from Les Capel from Stoke, which I knew would be hard because being a local player. And I got through that one okay. And then the first big hurdle was John Lowe, which, you know, obviously everybody expect me to lose, but my mentality was I didn't think that at all because you can't be that way.
But when you got to the final, you're up against this Bristow character. Larger than life, his fans would say confident, his opponents would say arrogant.
Both.
He would have used, you were a young kid, effectively. He would have used a bit of gamesmanship on you. He'd have tried to psych you out of it. How did you manage?
Do you know, it sounds a bit silly, but at the Jollies where we played the World Final, there was one room that had one dartboard, and that was the band room. There was all these sort of containers. Then there was another room with 2 boards. Eric always wanted to go in that one, the one with just the one board. So we made sure we got there early and got in there first. And he walked in, and he had to go in the other one.
So that was your bit of gamesmanship?
Yeah, that was mine. That was the only gamesmanship I had. And he didn't like it. He didn't like going in that other room.
Now, winning was one thing, but winning the way you did, and I just showed the end of the game, the famous Della checkout, which you've turned into a book, I see.
That's it. There we go.
There we are. 138 Game, Shot and Match by Della, published just last year. And this kind of, in a way, not just winning, but winning the way you won, Keith, it kind of set you up for life, really, almost, doesn't it?
I think because my final was, I think if anyone asked what was maybe the top 2 finals, you'd say Phil Taylor against Ray Barneveld and myself against Eric. And even people now still talk about why didn't Eric go for the bullseye to make it 2 legs all? He should have gone for it.
But he played safe.
He played safe.
Left you with a difficult one.
That's right. And Eric said if it had been 1-3-6, because 2 treble 20s stay together, he most probably would have gone for it. But a good example is, I mean, I had no money, Nigel. I was borrowing money off the officials that week. And and at the end of the week, I left the Magnum of champagne for him, and I brought a house in Enfield with a swimming pool 3 months down the road. That's what it done for me. So
you were made.
So it was really, I found it strange because I was going on all these TV shows, and I thought, oh my God, I was more nervous.
But you were a sensation.
I know, it's strange because I was having to throw darts for Robert Wagner and Stephanie Powers, the Heart to Heart programme. They'd done a programme, and it was like meeting people. I thought, God, I used to sit at home, and my wife Kim was a massive Heart to Heart programme. I didn't know at the time, so she'd have loved to sing met them, Stephanie Powers and Robert Wagner. So you met so many people that you've never met before and travel the world.
Fantastic.
Going on the QE2, the famous QE2. You know, it's been a fantastic life.
Amazing. And you've become one of the great aficionados, one of the great experts of darts. You've worked with Sky, you know, for donkey's years on their darts coverage. And when it comes to the statistics and the background of the players, Della's the man to go to. Rishi Sunak said recently we should do mathematics at school till we're 18. I thought, that's crazy. Most people just bunk off. They're so bored by the time they're 50. I mean, darts is good for mental arithmetic, isn't it?
It is, because, I mean, it's not normally by tens all the time. When I do the spotting for Sky, I have to tell the cameras where to go. I always add up to 10. It's a lot easier. And I think it should. I mean, I remember going to Japan in 1988, and there was a couple of young schools for young children playing soft tip and having education, maths, and it was fun. And the last few years, the PDC top players have been going to schools. And I think
have they?
Yeah, I mean, they've been going, and, you know, before maybe a Premier League night, they go to school. And so I think it's been really good. And you can see the children's faces. You know, it won't hurt. I mean, it doesn't mean you're going to start playing darts for a living, but it's fun.
But the trouble is, Keith, that it's, you know, Sky's great, but it's behind a paywall. It's not free to air as it was, you know, when you were at the top of your game. And the pub, the community, that's where we played darts. We went to pubs to have a drink, to chat to people, and to play darts and other games. Is the game dying with pubs?
I think it is, sadly, because when I won the world title, I played one tournament and then done 30 or 40 pubs all over Great Britain. And, you know, and sadly, food pubs. I think the smoking ban hurt a lot of the small pubs because, you know, they couldn't do anything else.
I mean, wash your mouth out with soap and water, but I agree with you.
Sadly, that was one of the problems. And now, as you say, it's food pubs. A lot of pubs are going. But it's a shame because it's somewhere you can go and have a game, you can meet people, and sadly, the world's changing, so is
Keith Della, I've got a dartboard at home, so I can play at home. I'm no blooming good. But I do enjoy watching great players, and I watched you win that 40 years ago. It was brilliant. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on Talking Pints. It really has. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good health.
OK, a short time left for Barrage the Farage. What do you have for me? Alex asks, if you had to back one Democrat candidate, who would it be? Oh, I think I want Joe Biden to go again. I mean, he can barely string a sentence together. But the trouble is they haven't got anybody else. I mean, who are they going to go for? The governor of California? I can't see that, given that the education system and everything else in California is being run about as well as Nicola Sturgeon has run Scotland. There's a guy called Pete Buttigieg, who was mayor of some tiny little town in Indiana. Hillary Clinton thinks she might make a comeback, but I don't see that. At least the Republicans are spoilt for choice. There's going to be a list of 3 or 4 runners and riders for that nomination, all of whom are very capable. However, only one man is actually going to come through and win the nomination. Another viewer asks, can you present Match of the Day, please? It's a wonderful idea. But I think actually what would be more fun is if I was to do a bit of cricket commentary. And there's a chap I know that rather likes cricket coming up in a minute. But before that, Jim asks, is it time for more independent politicians? Yes, 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 and yes. Absolutely, Jim, it is. The trouble is that people are elected in this country. Well, we say individuals are elected, but they're not really. It's all about parties. It's all about party leaders. And it's very, very tough for individuals to come through. And Richard asks, why does the parliamentary estate have so many bars and restaurants? Because hard-working members of parliament are there for such a long time that they need adequate refreshment. At least I think, Jacob, that's the reason that's given, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, and sometimes the House does sit late into the night, but it is a working place for several thousand people who need a canteen, but there's some finer dining than that as well.
Yeah, of course. Tomorrow night, I'm going to be live at 7 p.m. from Doncaster. I'll be preceded by Michelle Dewberry. She'll be live in Doncaster from 6 p.m. 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. tomorrow night. We're live from Doncaster. There may be some more tickets left. I don't know, gbnews.uk, but we'll be discussing tomorrow's all-important budget. Big day tomorrow, Jacob.
Very important day tomorrow, and that's what I'm going to be talking about this evening. Are we really going to see corporation tax whacked up? And did you know that some people pay almost 100% marginal rate where they get benefits taken away? And isn't that madness?
Yeah, there are people stuck, people doing rather well comparatively, but whose tax rates are a complete disaster.
Apparently, if you've got 6 children, it gets up to 91% at one point. And as I have 6 children, I have a vested interest in this.
Jacob, you would know about these things. All of that coming up in a moment. I'll see you live from Doncaster tomorrow night. But first, let's get the all-important weather.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst. Welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. Widespread frost and patchy ice across the UK tonight.